My name is Aksit, aka Annika. Welcome to my channel. And today we are working in Coloring Heaven Ancient Egypt magazine. And previously we had based this image here with acrylic wash. And I put up a poll on YouTube to see what pencils you wanted me to use for this. And you picked Polychromos, which is what I used. It's still a whip. It's obviously not finished. Parts of it are done, parts of it are not. In today's video, we are going to do just the skin of the face because Polychromos, especially on this base now, is quite a slow pencil, and I didn't want the video to get absolutely crazy long. So shortly after that, I will also make a video about lips and eyes and hair. I do not know if I'm going to do the video of the gold at all. As I've seen, I based some stuff here. Anyways, I hope you're going to get some helpful hints on coloring with hard pencil on top of acrylic wash. Just the word of warning, this is not the easiest pencil to work with on the acrylic wash. I prefer usually softer pencil like Prismacolor or Chromaflow or Artex, but I just wanted to show that this is certainly a possibility, and you can get kind of a multi-layered interesting skin on this base. So let's get cracking. First, let's talk about the base layer of the pencils. The one that I use for establishing the color temperatures of the face. This gives, if you put that layer down, it really helps the skin to look more alive and realistic. Although it kind of sounds counterintuitive, but I'm going to explain in a second. Basically, the forehead area of the face, which at the moment here isn't visible, but forehead would have usually kind of a yellowish undertones, warm yellowish ochreish undertones. So do the corners of the mouth. So I'm going to put tiny bit of warmth here. Just like that here. And I'm also slipping that very, very gently underneath her brows. It won't be much visible at all because there's going to be a strong shadow there, but I'm going to put it down anyway. It won't hurt. Okay, so forehead and here in the corners of the mouth, you would usually have yellow undertones. Then the cheeks, the sides of the nose, would have reddish undertones. Now, I already have red undertones down here on the cheeks because I did that already with acrylic paint, and the same with the nose. Nose has strong red undertones, but I already did that. Ears have reddish undertones, but I already did that. What I'm doing is I'm taking very, very light beige, which is the red beige, or beige red, sorry, and I'm going to put down soft, like I'm holding a pencil sideways. I'm not trying to put down very precise and very tight layer of pencil. What I'm doing here is I'm just going to give a very, very soft layer of pencil that will help the other layers to start blending and layering better. So I'm putting it down everywhere across her face, but this one doesn't have to be super tight or super precise. You just give a soft layer of pencil, and I know that this is going to be utterly invisible for you. It's actually invisible for me as well because her the basic skin tone I put down, the base is already quite dark, so you won't really see that pencil. But never mind, it's really good that it's there. Okay, So I have it on the nose as well, making sure that it's everywhere. Okay, and now the last color area is the chin underneath the nose and some other areas of the face that I'm going to explain in a second. For that, these are going to have bluish undertones. Now, I actually prefer to use slightly violet, or kind of a very pale violet. I find that Brutfoner Wisteria is very good for that. Holbein would have the same color. You know, Prismacolor has similar kind of a color as well, but Polychromos doesn't. So, totally acceptable alternative, since it's still coolish in a bluish undertone, is sky blue. You can use that. And I'm going to show you now how to kind of establish extra color areas with that. So, where does the blue go? Where are the cooler areas of the face? And this has nothing to do with shadows. This is just undertones, natural undertones of skin. You know, where they're cooler, where they have yellow undertones, where they have red undertones. So, temples, cooling down the temples. Since it's a big portrait, we need to do it. I'm not going to go now like super detailed with that portrait, but I at least want to give some, you know, tips and hints, you know, how I build the portrait if I, you know, go for it seriously. Then underneath the nose, this area here is also cool. So we're not putting down a shadow. We're not trying to shape the face yet. We are putting down the color areas. And in watercolor, you can actually put down very pale washes like that first. Like very pale, like ochreish here, very pale, you know, pinkish reddish hair, and very pale bluish underneath, and then start building other tones on top of them. And it gives a beautiful skin. But here we obviously are building it on top of already existing mass stone, which I put down with acrylic paint. And here the chin area is also going to be bluish, and I'm going to take it slightly up here, but all the chin area, give it, especially underneath the lips, is going to have a blue undertone. And this just adds skin extra rich tones and kind of an interesting color variations. And the face looks less flat. Even if you don't want to go, you know, into town with very deep shading, if you do that kind of a color sketch, it helps the skin look more interesting and alive. As I said, I do prefer actually to do that with not this color. I prefer slightly more purplish tone. Although classic way to do that would pretty much be kind of a like cobaltish blue, heavily diluted. Now, and another area that has that blue is underneath the eyes. So that is cooler area as well. So we're going to put a light layer underneath eyes. If you think about yourself, you know, for how you have to disguise the blue underneath your eyes. You understand what I'm talking about here. And here as well, it's a bit awkward with the camera in the way, and I'm a bit slower than I usually would be because I kind of operate the camera on my phone. Actually, not because I'm filming on my phone. Is quite close to the page here, so it's very easy for me to hit it if I get too sloppy. So I'm trying not to. And I'm putting that a little bit into the eyes as a, just to start with the tone of the eyes as a very, very thin, soft layer of sky blue into the so-called whites of the eyes, which, you know, I've said it before and I will say it again, are never white. Do not ever leave whites of the eyes white. They really are not. Okay, so I gave them a little bit of blue as well and took away a little bit of that stark whiteness now. And wings of the nose here, underneath the wings of the nose, there's an area of coolness here as well. And if you think about it yourself, how you have like bluish reddish area there that you have to cover with makeup to get even skin tone, that makes perfect sense. So I'm going to put blue here as well. And I'm taking it a little bit more up like this. Okay. Maybe strengthen the blue underneath the eyes. And you can see how I'm holding the pencil sideways. I'm not holding it very close and very tight circles like this. I'm holding it so I would touch the paper very lightly and put down light, soft, transparent layers. Okay, now we have the color areas established. I know that it's not very visible on this one, but it does help. It does really make difference in the long run. Now, next thing is we're going to desaturate. Make sure that the bridge of the nose, that we're going to keep the highlight here. I'm just going to put it down here now. Just going to desaturate it. This is cream. Sorry, it's ivory, not cream. It's ivory. One of my pencils that I have a hard time finding a replacement for. It's getting quite short, and for some reason it's sold out everywhere here, so I can't get replacement at the moment. And now we are actually starting with shading, and we're not starting with the lightest tones because we're working on the acrylic base, so we have limited amount of layers we can use, but we're starting kind of mid. And by mid, I mean this time I think I'm going to take the Pompeian red. Okay. And I'm starting to put down now the first kind of a shadow and kind of a shading areas. Now, for this, we need to first establish, it was brought to my attention that I didn't really explain things, you know, how and by what logic we shade the face. I thought, you know, there was so many videos on internet about how to color the face that it would have been redundant, but I understand now that a lot of you, you know, either, you know, haven't seen all the videos, or sometimes you find them too fast, or sometimes they don't give enough information, or, you know, nobody can see all the stuff, you know, that is out there. So let's just go over it. basically the main and the darkest areas that we have to pay attention now here are naturally on the face are here, this area, the corner of the eyes, and kind of where the skull dips. Just imagine if you touch your eye socket, you can see how it dips there. So there's going to be a pretty sharp shadow here in this area, which softens into kind of a lighter shadow on the sides of the nose. Then there's obviously going to be, this is now kind of not part of the natural face architecture, but in this case, there's going to be a pretty sharp shadow, a strong shadow underneath the hand here, because it's obviously covering the forehead and throwing a shadow onto the face. There's going to be shadow here, pretty strong, especially under this angle, the ears. One of the strongest shadows on the face is underneath the nose. This is always a kind of very dark shadow. And small but fairly deep shadows are here at the wings of the nose. There's a little dip here also that needs to be addressed. And there's going to be shadow, pretty short, kind of a strong shadow underneath the bottom lip. And then, of course, underneath the chin. So, but there's other shadows as well, but these would be the kind of the strongest ones that definitely need to be addressed. So we're starting here, and let's start on this side. So I'm going to put in first into the ears. And you can see once again that I'm working kind of pencil sideways. And I'm not establishing the deepest shadows here. I'm putting down the basic kind of a bigger shadows. Okay. And with Polychromos, you can't really rush too much. You can't be super fast because they will immediately, you will pay for it. Because they need to be put down with a gentle hand, especially in the big areas like this, or when you want the result to be smooth. If you get too fast, you get weird lines and blotches, so you kind of need to take your time with them. You cannot rush. And here I'm trying to establish a little reflected light on the jaw area here. So I made kind of like a stripe of color here, and I'm bringing it upwards, and I'm leaving this area here light. And later on, I'm going to put some lighter pencil in there to emphasize that further. So basically, now I'm not putting down the deepest shadows. I'm not putting, down, I'm putting down the overall kind of like shape of the face. The soft sculpting of the face. So as you can see now, there needs to be pretty dark area here. Now there's going to be chin here, but underneath the lip there's going to be pretty dark area here. And I'm bringing it down to the side because there's dip there as well. If you touch your own face, you can feel how your chin goes up. Put your finger in the middle of the chin and then bring it sideways, and you feel how it dips and then goes up again. This is what's happening here. This is chin, it dips and goes up again. So essentially that's what you're doing here. And it's, as I'm keep saying, it's an awkward angle for me, so I find it a bit hard to do it cleanly, because I usually would flip the book, sideways and upside down, and however the angle would work best for me. And at the moment I'm working at an awkward angle because I don't want to do that to you. Especially if you need to see exactly what I'm trying to achieve here. So here needs to be, oops, I went a bit too dark here, but it's fine. And I'm going to give a little bit reflective light here as well. So I'm doing kind of like a stripe of color that eventually joins here. So I'm not keeping it very long, but I'm having a little area here. Just for interest. That is, you could technically, bring this shadow totally to the outline. But I just think it adds interest to add those little kind of reflected light areas there. And also makes it look more lifelike. And just more fun. I like playing with the light a little bit, even if I'm doing, in this case, I'm doing pretty basic, kind of a flat, looking straight at your face with very kind of a conventional shadows, which, would be the easiest and the most tutorials type of a face. There's a lot of these, because, that's how you usually picture a person. Or even photograph. Most of the photographs would be person looking straight at you. And the light would be fairly traditional. Okay, and I'm going to the shadow areas of the nose as well. And now we're doing all underneath the nose like this as well. And we're bringing it almost totally down to the lip, but we're leaving a tiny band above the lip light. We're being gentle about it, but we're definitely leaving that tiny band there untouched. And as you can see, there's no deep shadows yet. Just very, very gently establishing the shape of the face. And it's going to be, especially because it's underneath that hand, there's going to be pretty deep shadow there underneath the hand. So we just keep working with the pencils gently sideways. And I know that a lot of tutorials teach you to kind of go very tight like this, but this is where you want to put down even and usually fairly saturated layer of color. And also, that's even longer for a big face like that. Yes, you can get amazing results, but I usually am not bothered. So I'm just putting shadow underneath here. And I'm not going to put shadow on top of the hair there because this is going to be black anyway. And this is going to be fairly black because I want it to be pretty dark. I'm having trouble actually getting there. So my hand doesn't bend that way very well. And I have to work upside down. But hey, we'll manage. It's just brace yourselves. This video is not going to be a short one. There's, this doing skin with layering pencils is not a short process, but it's a very enjoyable process. I find it hugely therapeutic, and I like establishing and kind of layering and playing with different colors and combining colors that people don't expect in the skin, and still get very kind of natural results occasionally. So okay, we have some shadow here, and now we have this area here. There's also going to be a little bit of a shadow that goes out here. So I'm going to get to the wings of the nose and the side of the nose, and here the shadow is actually going to be way darker there. I'm just putting down the first kind of a wide layer of pigment. And I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. And usually here hair is covering it, but there's a little dip here above the nose as well. Put your head on your forehead and bring it downwards to your nose, and you feel a dip. That dip also has a bit of a shadow. So the kind of a highlight of the bridge of the nose does not start between the brows like it often is drawn. It actually starts a bit lower because there's a dip here in your face, and to get kind of a more realistic looking face you need to put something in there. Okay, and I could work just eyes for an hour or and a half, but we're not going to do that. I am not going to try to put you off coloring faces. I will try to do somewhat simplified, but still, more realistic looking face. So here we're bringing it out a little bit again. And of course, if you color on clean paper, if you layer like this, you're always going to get more smooth and more perfect results. You will also spend twice as long time. But on acrylic wash, it's never going to be as smooth and as soft as it would be just doing it with pencils on a good paper. Let's not try to ask for impossible. So just taking it out there a little bit, taking it out there a little bit. Okay, now we have the first. Okay, I forgot the ear, so let's do the ears here. And ears have a lot of red, but I already put the red undertones into the ears, so I'm not particularly worried about adding extra there. But if I just had the regular base stone or mass stone on the ear, I would make sure that I would put a lot of pink or red in there, because ears do have a lot of. Okay, and I'm going to do the tip of the nose here as well, and just start putting tiny bit of shape in without getting too detailed, because the next layer now I'm going to take a fairly dark pencil and start shaping the face that way. And I'm going to put some color here in the wings as well. There's just going to be shadow in this area, although they're protruding, but they're kind of also curving downwards. So there's going to be shadow here. So I gave it a little bit of a shape, and I'm not going to give her face, like there's no button nose. I'm not going to do a button here. I want her nose to be fairly straight. And if I wanted, I could just go over once again and just strengthen now the layering with this pencil. We're kind of the first layer. And I don't know if you're able to see, but the fact that we established those color areas already gives me different results. Like I'm using the same pencil, but the color variation of the shading is already there because I have those color areas put down. So we need to get that skin dark now. So we need to go pretty dark with next layer, but I just wanted to have the first shadows down so I could now follow them. And I didn't want them down with very dark, because if the dark layer goes down first, especially on this acrylic base, it often finds the tiniest imperfections of the underneath, the kind of underlayer, and it's then very hard to fix. Whereas if there's already some oily waxy layer there that it can grab onto, the imperfections will show a little bit less. Now we're gonna go with the next layer, and there's going to be a long ugly phase in this style of coloring. So let's grab one of my favorite pencils for establishing kind of a first dark layers, pretty much in any set. And this is red violet in Polychromos. In light fast pencils, for example, I would love to use raisin. It is a beautifully deep color with a little bit of a kind of a brownish undertone as well. Caput Mortuum is another one that I like to use, but here I've gone for red violet. So I'm doing the ears now and making sure they have a nice deep shadow, but also leave some area here so they can have some highlight as well. This is only first dark layer, so I'm not particularly worried that, you know, it's not super dark yet or super deep or super contrasty. Okay, and now we're gonna go here. I might as well put something on the neck as well. I should have done that earlier. I'm going to put it down now. And I'm doing that pretty dark because the shadow is going to be very dark there. It doesn't really have any light hitting it now. And now we have to start doing this again. And here we go. Start underneath the hand this time. And we're going to establish that there's quite a lot of color here. And at the moment I'm ignoring the eyebrows because the hand is touching the skin. The shadow here underneath the hand eventually is going to be very dark. But it's a big kind of an area that is actually throwing shadow. So this area that is throwing shadow is actually quite far away from the face. So the shadow isn't very sharp. It's kind of a, I'm fading it out like this. So it's going to be pretty dark here, but I'm going to fade it out. And here, let's keep that alive here. And see how I'm moving the pencil back and forth, bring down. Plenty of pigment, but no pressure. Basically, up and down or circular movements, whichever one your hand feels more comfortable with. Like to tell you that it has to be circular. Yeah, it's nice if you can do that, but if you feel uncomfortable with doing circular, you can do up and down as well, or kind of a tighter spirals, or find out the movements your hand finds natural. And as long as you get the even layer of the pigment down, who's to say, what is the, right or wrong? And just keep going. Do your thing. As you can see, I'm not doing... I occasionally do the circular as well in tight areas, but in bigger areas like this, I pretty much keep my pencil sideways and, move in different shapes that just make sure that I'm filling the tooth of the paper kind of evenly. And just don't forget about the natural hills and valleys of the face. And if you're unsure about something, I keep suggesting that, but so maybe you'll fast forwarded a little and landed into this area of the video. Touch your face and feel where the dips are. And it actually does help. But here I'm making sure that there's a nice bit of shadow underneath her lip. This will be deepened even further. But, so far, so good. Bring in this color more in here as well. Here, and the eyes as well. I'm going to now, this is now awkward angle-wise. I'm actually doing pretty strong line here, and then bringing it upward slightly. And here underneath the eye, I'm leaving the waterline here untouched. It already has the pink in it. I already put pink acrylic paint into it. So I'm not touching it much at the moment. I will work over it later on. But I am getting into the lash line here and bringing it kind of softly outwards. So you have this smoky feel, and also the underneath of the eye, it is naturally a darker area, one of the dark-ish areas of the face. Kind of naturally, your skin is a bit darker or redder here. So to get a good face, you need to kind of put that down as well. So I'm trying to do that upside down, sideways. I keep forgetting how, awkward it is to color with pencils with that camera angle, and I can't turn the page. And I'm going to give a little bit of a darkness here as well. And here I'm keeping it pretty tight. And now I'm going to try to get to this, make the nose. Nose, I find one of the trickiest elements of the face. There's so many shapes and little valleys, and everybody's nose, of course, also is slightly different, that it's kind of hard to get it right. We want pretty nice shadow underneath the nose there. And the nostrils area, actually, we have to darken a lot, but we'll just, I'm going to bring the nose shadow down in a little triangle. So I'm bringing it down like this in half moon from nostril to nostril, and then bring it down from the wings of the nose, so you have a little bit of a softer light area here in between as well. My son came in, so I had to break the recording for a short while, but I'm back at it again. So we're working underneath the nose here. I wasn't sure, suddenly didn't remember anymore what we were doing. And also establishing that little dip here. Just making sure we have a nice soft shadow underneath the nose. Everything is going to be darkened, if it looks weird in some areas, don't mind it. We're just putting down dark areas now. But basically, I'm putting down the cool areas because I'm still using fairly reddish pencil. Eventually, I will move to kind of a browner and more ochre tones as well. But at the moment, we're essentially still purple here. So I'm darkening now the corner of the eye here. So basically, it's underneath where the eyebrow starts to this area of the nose. It's going to be the darkest. So we want a good bit of pigment there. Here we're doing this. See, the socket of the eye is here. So essentially, we are establishing the socket of the eye here. That's where the socket of the eye runs. And your eyebrow sits pretty much on top of the socket. So you want this kind of a almost little half moon here, and then you go inwards from it. And I well understand that this will not be super popular video. It's not going to be very exciting. It's going to be slow. And, you know, the progress is going to be slow. But we can totally do it. And yes, you can see the texture of the pencil. You would pretty much with, even if you were working on normal paper, but you will even more with acrylic paint. And even if you try to put it down very, very smoothly, sometimes there's tiny imperfections that you kind of just have to live with. But, you know, you get usually, I find that, you know, the easiest and fastest and kind of often the smoothest results you get with that base if you use Prismacolor pencils or something, you know, very soft. Artex pencils also give very smooth and, you know, fairly quick and smooth result. But you can certainly do it with layering pencil as well, like this one. So we just keep going and extending now here the nose. And I will obviously keep fixing it all the time. Like, skin isn't perfect at first go thing. You just keep putting down layers. And if you're not happy with something, you try to fix it in the next layer, or, you know, establish new color depth or temperature. It just keeps changing all the time. But basically, now I put down what I was actually trying to kind of at first say and totally got distracted was, oops, sorry, I hit the camera. I'm going to have a sip of drink. Is that I'm putting down also kind of the coolness of the shadows. And the coolness of the shadows here mostly will come of this kind of a purplish shading. But this is just an underlayer. Now we're going to put more browns on top of it eventually. And see, now I'm being very, very gentle. But I'm still wanting a bit more darkness underneath her nose. So I'm being gentle, but, you know, kind of keep moving back and forth barely touching, pencil slightly sideways, to gradually put down more pigment underneath her nose, because I feel that it needs to be more in a shadow overall, the whole area there. Because here's another dip. You go, put your finger underneath your nose into the little dip here, okay? And then move it sideways, and you can feel first it goes slightly up and then it goes down. So this is the dip here, it goes down. There's a deepened area here. Can you feel it between the nostril here? So we're going to give that a bit more shadow and shape. And then once you get the cheek goes up again. So basically we want slightly darker area here, and the cheeks then are going to be more plump. And of course, the highest area of the face, is going to be your bridge of the nose, which has the kind of the strongest highlighted area. Of course, not as wide as this. I will bring it more, tighten it up eventually. And then the next highest will pretty much be your cheekbones. So you have to have highlight, kind of a lighter area here. And then, of course, your chin is also going to be highlighted. But here, of course, the problem is that your hand here, the hand is here covering the chin. So there's possibly needs to be like tiny, but very tight shadow here, because the hand is literally touching, it's against the skin. Therefore, any shadow that is going to be there needs to be very tight and sharp. The further away something is, the softer and more diffused is its shadow. But if something is very close like that, the shadow is going to be tight, small, and fairly sharp. Okay? Here you can hear my dog clipping away cheerfully on the floor. Okay, so this is all going to be eventually, deepen more. So again, I'm just establishing things here. Now, and I might leave this pencil to be for a while. Oh no, actually, I need to establish the nose more here as well. And eventually the blender will help a lot, but for blender to work, you have to have nice amount of pigment down. So we just keep working until we feel we have enough. Now, oops, I keep shaking the camera. I hope you're not getting seasick there. Okay, now we're moving on to really dark brown. And the really dark brown is walnut brown. And we're going to put now the really dark shadows here. And these ones can't be too big. These really, need to be the darkest. And we can't really wait too long to put dark shadows down with this method, because we're coloring on acrylic base and we need we're on tight schedule with the layers, because eventually we will, won't be able to put more layers down. So we need to now get this really dark, not very wide area, but really dark area underneath the hand, where the hand is touching the forehead. So we want the shadow there to be the darkest. So there I'm actually pressing, relatively hard. I'm not totally flattening everything. I'm not going super hard, but I'm pressing down harder than before, because I really, really want that area to be nice and dark. We're also making sure that on the hairline here, and because hair is against her skin, not away from it, we put down a shadow that is very close to the hair and with a pretty sharp, and here as well, you can see slightly softened edge, but the shadow is not very wide because the hair is essentially against the skin. And the same here underneath the hair. Give it a little bit of a shadow, but very, very tight. Okay, now next area that needs to be done again is this area here. I find that the eyebrows actually start a bit further away than they should. The eyebrows should start about here, not here, which is kind of confusing. My hand where I'm coloring is like something is off, but I then realized that these eyebrows are too far from where they actually should be. I might need to fix that a little bit. But that's easy enough, I will need to put the eyebrows in anyway with black pencil at the end. And here now I'm going to really give the nostrils as much shadow as I can. I'm going to deepen that dip here above her lip, adding shadow to the sides and kind of making sure that this shadow here is nice and dark. Making sure that the corners here have a little bit more of a color. And here underneath, this area would be nice and dark as well. But there would be a little kind of reflected light here, which kind of makes the nose look more alive. And don't try to make everything super symmetrical, because faces are not. You know, if one side of the face has slightly different shading than another, you know, some areas are, you know, not identical to the other side, that is actually a good thing. Not when it goes totally wonky, I don't mean, but, you know, if there's slight differences, that actually makes the face look more natural. And now I'm going to this area, the side of the face, and I'm strengthening now, and I'm going over everything that I did with that red violet. I'm essentially going over all the areas. But if I had done that from the beginning with just the walnut brown, it would have been very kind of a dead and dull and flat skin tone. But now that I have the red violet and kind of other colors underneath there, it looks more interesting and alive. So that is why we're using a lot of colors in the skin tone. But it's always better to have more colors than less colors, because that is what is going to make your face look like it's actually alive. There's blood moving underneath the skin. There's light playing on different surfaces and textures of the skin. And I like to give a little bit of a dip like this. The natural corner of the mouth has a tiny bit, if you touch it, you can feel it. There's a little kind of a bump or dip there. So I like to draw that in. It's a tiny little shadow. And immediately her mouth looks more like she's going to start speaking, or she's holding back a smile. I'm going to put in nice dark tone in her lip. That also kind of livens. Yeah, and that's all I'm going to do there at the moment. And can you feel how now we are giving it a little bit more light? And see how those little dips in the corners of the mouth immediately changed the face and made her lips look much more natural. And here once again, I'm pressing now. I'm not pressing, but this time I'm not doing like super light. I'm going to do normal pressure. And I'm establishing this reflected light in the side again, but this time kind of sharper because it's a darker tone I'm establishing it with. I think on those eyelids I'm going to put green eventually. Before that, I'm going to go over the shadows here with walnut brown. And I need to go in there again and kind of get rid of the purpleness. Now, if it was Caucasian skin, I would leave a lot of that red purple very visible, or try to cover it up less, because especially Scandinavian and kind of Northern European skin tones have a lot of this kind of a pinkish reddish undertone. So do Irish, actually. Irish people's, kind of, most of them are kind of, I've been, joking with my husband most of our life together that, if he's in the sun, he looks like he's transparent, he literally glows. His skin is very white with reddish pinkish undertone. And that skin is actually, I find, one of the hardest to color, because it's very hard to kind of figure out what colors to use to actually depict, the correct tones and shadows in like super light skin. Okay. So there. I'm doing the shadow, strengthen the shadow underneath the eye pretty strongly. And it will look better once I actually darken the eyeball as well. At the moment it looks even a bit weird because the eyeball is so flat here and there's strong shadows around the eye. So it kind of looks slightly off, That might be why you look, it's like there's something is wrong or something is not right. That's because we have those flat areas there. And once these get more established, things will look better. Of course, no, I can always fail. Like, I can eventually, like, things can go wrong and I might end up totally scrapping this project because, it just did not come out right. I'm in no way, shape, or form professional or, like conventionally trained or anything. Anything I do or know, I have picked up from different sources, mostly from videos all over the years, videos or just looking at things, just observe things. This is, I find, working for me. Since I started coloring, I look at things. I look at everything so differently. I look at art differently. I notice how things were done. I noticed how shading was put down. I notice how, when driving the car, I notice the colors in the sky and kind of translate them in my head into the color names almost, So this is a good way of kind of consciously train yourself to see the color, to see the shading everywhere. And make yourself to notice it. Okay, so. Alrighty. And now I'm going to take another pencil. This has been a long time with one single walnut pencil, but we are finally moving on. So I am going to I might grab the Venetian red, which is essentially reddish brown. I find this particular pencil is kind of fairly soft on its own. And therefore, in Polychromos line, kind of a lovely to go over some areas where there's unevenness or imperfections. And basically we now go over everything again and slightly in. Not much, but kind of slightly outside now. Leaving, of course, the highlight areas around. Like I wouldn't go much in there because I don't want to lose. And here again, I am trying to kind of bring the colors in here a tiny bit. So I'm making sure there's enough shadow underneath her lip here. Bringing that a bit down as well. Just bringing, going over all the dark areas and then bringing it up slightly. And out of the dark areas a little bit. I grabbed now the brown ochre, and this will now give us more warmth. And once again, we go over the area and maybe slightly out, but not much. We're now trying to kind of hold on to these light areas a little while. They will be darkened somewhat. They won't stay as light as they are at the moment. Here we're kind of making the bridge, the side of the nose a bit wider. I felt they were a bit too narrow here. It didn't look natural. It looks better now. Also, now make the bridge of the nose a little narrower. At the moment it's too wide. But I want to do kind of a smooth transition so it wouldn't be a sharp thing there. Going over shadow areas as well with all the colors. And I might have to ask or add some, like I feel here, I'm kind of losing darks. So I'm re-establishing some darks and I'm neutralizing them with red. Violet, now I put a lot of warm tone there. And I wanted to kind of cool it down here a bit. So I put down more red violet. You can keep doing that back and forth. Cooler tones in shadows, warmer tones in the areas of the skin that are more highlighted or shinier. Okay. I'm bringing them all down. And yes, if you wonder, it would be faster. Most likely, well, definitely, with Prismacolors. Not now super fast or anything, but, no skin is super fast if you do it in any way, in some detail, or, kind of try to get it looking a little bit more natural. But it would be somewhat faster. I'd say about, I don't know, how between half and 1/3 faster, depending on, into how much detail you go either way and how things are kind of going for you as well. Because sometimes you come across more problems. There's occasionally a little bit of unevenness on the acrylic base, which can be a bit of a pain to fight, and in some cases you just can't, it will be slightly less even and smooth than you'd like. The blender will help at the end, but blender also isn't a miracle tool. So I just keep adding layers of this warm brown ochre, and thus also deepening this area. I can't get that area even. I've done something weird there, and I'm struggling to get this area even, so I'm trying to kind of figure out if that's how it's going to be, in which case I just have to live with it. I think there might have been a little paint, like I didn't pay attention and I didn't smooth the underlayer out properly. That's what you have to remember when you're putting down the underlayer, is try to kind of move back and forth to the side with the brush to make sure that the base is as smooth as possible and as little pencil marks as possible. And it's totally doable because you are not working with a thick acrylic. You're working with the wash, and it's quite easy actually to. I'm not saying easy, okay, but it's quite possible and not super complicated to put down in fairly smooth layer because it is liquid. No method is foolproof, and things happen. And I think something has happened here slightly in this area that I am struggling a bit to get an even coverage. Okay, but now the face is still looking kind of flattish. So next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to go in with our Geranium Lake, which is pretty vibrant and strong red. Nothing shy about this red. And I'm really putting down a layer of red. It's, in this dark area, because to get a blush into this dark area, it needs to be, like, I've seen people trying to do it with, actual pinks and kind of blush colors, and, struggling and not really getting a good, lively, blood under the skin feel. And that's because especially in a dark skin tone or in a deep shadows. Pink is not going to really give you what you need. You need good, vibrant, strong red to actually get the effect you want. So I'm going to bring it down pretty much to the side of the face. And you can almost immediately see, once I'm bringing it out into the highlight area now, that it does liven the face. And I'm doing it on this side as well. And on the dark, I give it, like pretty decent, not hard pressure, but I'm not being super delicate about it. And then when we get to the light area, I am getting very light-handed, and I'm now working in fairly tight little circular movements. You can see that, yeah? And I'm taking it up from the dark shadows into the cheeks, into the highlighted areas. It is dark color, but if you put it down lightly, it is really pretty. And I'm going to put it into the ear as well here, just for the effect of it having to be here as well, in the shadows of the ears. And now I'm going to also put it more into the nose, because your nose is going to be quite red by nature. And here in the wings as well. There was already red undertone, as I said. I put down kind of a pink undertone on the nose already with acrylics. But we need to deepen it. And here as well. Underneath the nose as well, you're going to have reds. If you look at your nose, you'll see you have all the pinks and reds. Loads of them in your nose. And can you see how she's immediately, the skin, even though it's still kind of, unblended, but already it's becoming more natural, smoother. And it's always a good idea to give one side a little bit deeper shadow on one here than another, just, kind of to have it slightly different. Because there's no such thing as identical shadows in nature. So a little bit of a difference is, if it's too symmetrical, it looks weird and fake. It actually looks weird. It looks nicer when there's a little bit. Like the nose actually started looking better after I made it slightly different on this side, the shadowing. I don't know if you kind of noticed that. And I keep adding here even more layers of red. Maybe putting a little bit more red underneath her nose as well. And technically there's tiny bit of kind of pink in the chin as well. So I'm going to pop some into her chin as well. There's going to be other colors over it anyway, so it won't be very strongly visible, but it gives a little bit of a feel that there's life in her face. And that's what red does. And then I'm going to pop it here in the corner. Find a sharper part of it and put it here in the corner. And here in the corner. And here. and a little bit here. And then this part here is going to be pretty strong red. And this part here also has a bit of red in it. And doing it on the other side as well. Corner pretty red, leave a tiny highlight at the top, and then put more red here in a kind of a like half moon, and leave a little highlight in the middle. And to that highlight you can eventually even add a tiny gel pen white highlight in the middle, because that part is moist, so you know, to show that this is slightly wettish or moist. And to make the eye look more natural, before we do anything else with the eye, then there's loads that needs to be done, but underneath everything I'm going to put a little bit of red into the eyeball as well, especially in the corners here. Not a huge amount, not something that will dominate, something that kind of glows and shows blood vessels, or hints at blood vessels, because we're not going to draw them out. You know, there are usually exposed blood vessels in the corners of the eyes, and those eyes are big enough so they would be visible, but it's a big enough portrait. So we're going to put a tiny bit of red into the corners and leave them to be for time being. I'm only doing it because I have the red pencil in my hand. And this is now Geranium Lake. Or, sorry, Pale Geranium Lake. And I could do the lips now as well, but I leave that a bit later. Now. And I have another red here, which is Deep Scarlet. And I'm going to add extras, kind of like slightly different color here in the corner. Now, slightly stronger color here on the nose. This is going to be kind of blended out eventually. We just need to, you know, get there. Now, and slightly deeper color also to the side of the face. But I'm doing that now gently because that pencil is darker and I don't want to totally go overboard. Okay. And I have a feeling that I should... This is now the red violet again. And I'm going over this area a bit and darkening it. It's kind of immediately next to and underneath the nose. Just to make sure. And this bit here as well, deepen it. Okay. And the next color I'm going to work with is Sanguine. And this is now one of my off-center Polychromos. It doesn't happen too often with them, but it does happen. And it's very annoying because there's a lot of waste with sharpening. But, you know, it is what it is. Can't really help it. So I'm bringing once again. No, I'm not even being very, very pressed to cover everything again with that tone. I'm going to give a little bit of a glaze with it over other tones, but I'm now starting to bring it more and more into the highlights. I'm going over the reds as well. The red will be not dominating, you know, they will be part of the layers and layers. They don't have to stand on their own. The blush becomes part of the skin. And here with the chin, you know, it kind of becomes smaller, as you see. I don't want it to kind of protrude out madly either, but I don't want to lose it either, so I just keep playing with it. Now, and I'm going over this kind of a redness of the nose, that's sanguine as well. So once again, you know, all the strong red bits will become part of the skin tone, part of all the layers that we've built. So it's eventually going to look like natural glow of the skin. Okay. And underneath the nose here especially. And remember to try to leave a tiny band of light around the lips, because we will use that. See how I'm building here? How the weird phase is now disappearing, because I'm now building the main skin tone with it. Because this sanguine is beautiful. But there's still going to be stronger highlights in the skin, so I'm trying not to neglect those either. Okay, and that's where the see how I keep pretty much unifying the skin now. There's some areas that are still fairly light, but we're going to take care of that soon as well. And then there's this area here that I want to do green, so I'm taking some of the pencil out of here, because I want to do that area green. And I'm like makeupy green. But yeah, I just keep layering, keep adding, keep evening out the skin tone with that sanguine pencil. Because this, I think, it's kind of like sienna-ish tone that I think is very similar to actual Egyptian, the way they depicted the skin tone on their murals, on the temple paintings and grave paintings. So I think this one is a good one to be kind of this unifying tone. And as you can see, I haven't really used much at all of anything that is traditionally called or traditionally considered to be a skin tone. In the set. Therefore, I don't really think that skin tones as such exist. You can do skin tones with pretty much any set. Granted, some sets have better choices, you know, and easier choices than other for building a skin tone. But at the end, it's possible to build skin tones with pretty much any pencils. So, and you know, they don't need to be kind of just peach and beige. These ones, peaches and beiges, are usually used at the end almost like a blenders or kind of a unifying tones. Most of the skin is built from altogether different and sometimes pretty haphazard colors. So now I'm going into that corner of the mouth as well that I put the yellow into, and I'm making sure that I'm glazing the sanguine over it so it would blend into the skin tone more. But you can see the warmth still there and how it lifts the mouth. So I just keep going over and smoothing with a gentle hand and pretty wide circular movements. Okay, and here I'm grabbing also the burnt ochre. In a second, I'm going to put things away a bit. Ochre, and once again, a warm tone. Just another layer added. And the more layers you add like this, the more complex and interesting your skin tone is going to look. And even if there, you know, are imperfections, a lot of them because of the base, you know, because, you know, acrylic base is never going to be still competing with good pencil paper. Even though there are imperfections, one thing that you can't say about skin tone lists like that is that it looks flat or boring because of all the different tones and colors and shadows. I'm making sure that I want this to be kind of part of the mass tone as well. So I'm getting close to now being done with the main skin tone. I'm going to deepen some shadows, put down the highlight colors, and then I can show you a little bit how I blend them out. Well, there's most of the blending is done, but you know, a little bit of extra doesn't hurt. I'm going to put a little bit more here, because I find that this highlight there is too bright considering that there's hand blocking light. But I leave a little bit of a highlight. It's just, it would look a little bit more natural. Okay, and now I'm going to put a little bit of a deep down. Where is my walnut? Just making sure that I haven't, because there's, you know, I've glazed over now some lighter pencils. The darks are losing their edge a bit. So I'm just re-establishing the darks again. And I'm doing it pretty sharply, making sure that there's as much as possible where I want them. Just making sure that I have the depth of the color here. And underneath the eye, making sure that I have everything sorted here. Deepening the corners of the eyes, deepening the color in the nostrils underneath here. I'm actually taking some indigo, and when I want it really dark, I'm adding tiny bits of indigo. Because there's so many different reds and very warm browns down, it won't look blue. It'll just give very, very dark shadow. And I want it immediately underneath the hand. Okay, I want it very, very gently here. Almost none in the corners of the eyes. I want it in the nostrils to make sure that the nostrils are very dark, because we can't see into them at all. They're like little deep caves on the face. And I also want it underneath the lip. Just making sure that there's nice and deep shadow here. And I'm going to also re-establish that little corners of the mouth. Little dimple. She's going to smile any moment now. So I'm going to darken this bit here and this bit here. Just making sure that the darks are really dark. Okay, a little bit underneath her chin also. And then I'm going to go over that with Walnut. And then I'm going to put on some burnt ochre here. Just to go over them, lose the blue. And there we go. We have a nice shadow for the neck. And now we're going to get the ivory. Make sure that this area here is nice and highlighted. Now, and chin as well. I'm going to take the indigo again. I would like to darken underneath the eye even more. The eyes aren't finished by any means at the moment. Okay, a chin. And I'm lifting the lips from away from that dip, so they're kind of more raised underneath the nose. That'll become, you know, better visible or understandable once I've done the lips themselves. And I'm making sure that I'm smoothing the transition into the highlight areas a bit more. And the chin as well. Just soften it a bit. Okay. This is now burnt ochre, if I didn't say. I probably didn't. And now I'm grabbing the Caran d'Ache blender. Actually, no, first I'm going to add a little bit more red to her. I'm going to take the Geranium Lake Pale, and I'm going to add a bit of extra red. And bringing it more into that highlight area as well. The same on the other side. Just add a bit more life to her. And even in the corners of the eyes, I'm just adding it pretty much everywhere I feel she could use a bit of more liveliness to her skin. And narrowing that bridge of her nose a little bit more. It was still too wide to my liking. I think it's getting there now. All right, and now we start the blending, doing it in gentle movements, not too wide. Light areas first, then go into dark, so you wouldn't bring too much of the pigment into the areas you tried to keep as pale. So I'm essentially blending these out first, and then I'll start, like here as well is a light area. I am not going super flattening in the eyebrows because I want to put down actual eyebrows. Kind of like with black pencil. And if I totally flatten the pencil there, then it's not going to be possible. So I'm trying to totally flatten the tooth or whatever the texture of the paint. So I'm not going to do much flattening there. I just leave it as is. But on acrylic base, some blending at the end. You can do it with pencils as well. You know, just do it with a light pencil, but with a light pencil you have to take into account the fact that it will lighten the whole thing. Whereas even if it isn't very opaque, but it will still kind of, you know, dull the tones or kind of go over the tones. So sometimes the blending tools, the blending pencils or the blending sticks are a better choice, genuinely. Alrighty, so let's add a little bit of darkness here and there. This is red violet again. This adds more depth and interest than walnut brown, so I'm going to put that down here again in some dark areas to re-establish them a bit. This happens several times throughout the coloring process, that you need to re-establish the darks, more so that you know, need to re-establish the light areas, because obviously. So the corner of the mouth again, the corner of the mouth, and underneath the lips. Okay, and are we going to put in the eyebrows? Ouch, things are flying. This eyebrow starts really at the corner of the eye. So now that's how I did the skin of the face. I will have to cut off here because otherwise the video is getting too long. This is kind of a closer now to the final result. You can see how it will eventually look. In next video I am going to do lips and eyes and hair, so stay tuned for that if you have any interest. Especially the hair is kind of like super simple and super fast way to do hair. So thank you for watching. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe and comment so YouTube keeps offering you my videos. And I hope you're going to have lovely morning or evening or afternoon, whatever the time is in your corner of the world. Have a wonderful creative time, and bye bye.